You probably don't know the roots to the top cause of unnatural death, but it's called democide, death by government. This is not some political message, it is rather one psychological. In this article, we continue our exploration of Dr. Carl Jung's insights into the origins of the state and its effects on myriad aspects of society, as found in his last great work, The Undiscovered Self. Last article, we explored how the growing power of the state leads to the destruction of the individual. So let us continue to build on these observations. This is an article written by William H. Douglas of thelatterdayLiberator.com. Quote, "The bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. But if the individual, overwhelmed by the sense of his own puniness and impotence, should feel that his life has lost its meaning, which after all is not identical with public welfare and higher standards of living, then he is already on the road to state slavery, and, without knowing or wanting it, has become its proselyte. The man who looks only outside and quails before the big batalons has no resource with which to combat the evidence of his senses and his reason. But that is just what is happening today. We are all fascinated and overawed by statistical truths and large numbers and are daily apprised of the nullity and futility of the individual personality, since it is not represented and personified by any mass organization. Conversely, those personages who strut about on the world stage and whose voices are heard far and wide seem to the uncritical public to be borne along on some mass movement or on the tide of public opinion, and for this reason are either applauded or extricated. Since mass suggestion plays the predominant role here, it remains a moot point whether their message is their own, for they are personally responsible, or whether they were merely a function as a megaphone for collective opinion. Now, this seems like a lot to unravel, so let's talk about this quote from Carl Jung. Of course, talking in psychological terms, we have to really break it down. So, individualists are individualists not because they're arrogant or selfish, just the opposite. It is because we recognize that every human being is worthy of dignity and respect, and those aren't just political platitudes for us. Every person is worthy of being able to pursue happiness, to choose to live the sort of life which he or she believes will greatly magnify his or her joy upon this earth, that adds value and meaning to his or her existence. And the only person who can possibly determine what those things are, which bring so much joy for the individual person, what make that specific person happy and gives meaning and value to that individual's life, is his or her own self. No other person or conglomerate of people are omniscient enough to know how to design the perfect pencil at the perfect price, much less design the perfect human life. This is something we all intuitively understand when confronted with individuals giving us orders. Most people will not do what you order them to do on the streets, no matter how many PhDs you have, but which we forget or double think away when it comes to the state. When it comes to the state, the government, we accept the political doctrine that because of its data, because of its scientific experts, because of its vast array of resources, it can do that which we otherwise know is impossible, that it, through judicious application of its power and wealth, can design the perfect human life and wipe away the problems of human existence. This powerful delusion not only ignores the fact that in most of the problems of the world, it is some action of the state. The problems of war, crime, poverty, and famine are all made exponentially worse by the state than they would be without it, but it actually contradicts everything we actually know about reality and human nature. If people are evil, corrupt, greedy, sinful, in short, untrustworthy and corrupt, then the last thing that makes sense to do is to give them the power to realize their lusts by placing into their hands the powers of government. But we do it because, as Dr. Jung notes, we are overawed by the apparent omnipotence and omniscience of the state. Its indoctrination and its apparent grandeur lulls us into believing that it can do what no one can, and in that conviction we surrender ourselves to it. In comparison to the state and its dazzling but false glory, the individual is made to feel and appear insignificant, and it treats us as such, something you can clearly see in the recent pandemics where governments have overridden the ability of individuals to make their own medical and life decisions. The state's experts, its technocrats, claim all the authority and all the knowledge necessary to run our lives and ensure our comfort, safety, and health if we would but obey them. People are merely data and statistics that can be manipulated as needed for the state's ends. This, of course, always falls apart. Just look at the lockdowns. The state's technocrats promised that through lockdowns, masking, and social distance and isolation, that COVID-19 could be controlled and its spread arrested. The state's technocrats promised that through lockdowns, masking, and social distance and isolation, that C-19 would be controlled and its spread arrested. They promised they were saving lives, and when the lockdowns failed, famine spread and the suffering became so great that people would rather die from C-19 than be cut off from humanity anymore. The government technocrats treated all the suffering of those people as statistics to be discarded in the goal of the collective good. Individuals, they claimed, are clearly too stupid to make their own choices. Only the struggling sages of the state are smart enough to decide how you live, what your life is worth, and how you die. But how could the experts know what to do? Yes, they were experts on the spread of viruses, but even in virology, there was a plethora of science demonstrating that lockdowns were and would be failures. And what about employment? Were the people calling for the lockdowns experts in employment? Did they understand that over 33 million people in America alone would lose their jobs and their means of survival? Did the experts decide to let these people become homeless and starve anyway? Were the virologists and politicians calling for lockdowns also expert economists? Did they understand that the lockdowns would destroy the global economic web, causing worldwide famine? Did they know that skyrocketing prices and shutting down businesses would threaten hundreds of millions, billions even, with mass starvation? Did they know they were murdering children and did it anyway? Were the virologists and politicians calling for lockdowns also expert in psychology? Did they know that there would be a worldwide wave of domestic violence, depression, and suicide? Did they know that suicides would double in places all over the world? Did the experts know they were driving people to murder themselves because of the mental terror and anguish caused by their fear-mongering and isolation? The answer to all these questions is a simple, single word: no. They were not psychologists, sociologists, economists, employment specialists, historians, or farmers. The virologists and politicians weren't experts in any of these fields, much less all of them, but they still spoke and acted as they were. This means even the statement that experts were leading the nations of the world and calling for lockdowns was and is a lie. Whatever you want to claim about someone like Dr. Anthony Fauci, he was not an economist, and listening to him give economic advice, such as shutting down businesses, is not listening to an expert. It is listening to an uninformed cretin equal to any other person on the street. We were not then, nor now, led by experts. We are led by people claiming power over every aspect of society based on their narrow, limited knowledge of but one small aspect of existence, lying to you about their actual knowledge, and people believed them because they so perfectly preach the lies of the state that we have been indoctrinated to believe since kindergarten. But it isn't enough to merely point out that they aren't experts. We must realize that the entire claim to possible expertise is a myth. They did not know what would happen when they started locking down society, and they could not know. Human existence is far too complex, filled with far too much information and containing too many variables for any single person or group of people, no matter how large, how well educated, or how expert, to adequately comprehend, direct, or order. Humans are not gods, and to treat them as if they were, to bend the knee to the self-proclaimed expert classes and be subservient to the declarations believing that if we but do their will, then they will fix society, is blasphemy and idolatry because it treats humans as if they were deities. The lockdowns, with their millions of deaths from global famines and suicides caused by the lockdowns, are proof of what happens when we forget this simple truth that Dr. Jung has been telling us, especially throughout this whole series we're doing here. Collectivism is the precursor to mass murder. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know this one was a bit more heavy because we're talking about some real-world experiences that happened not so long ago. But we have to continually learn from history. Do you want some select group of people in control of your life, millions of miles away? Are they experts in every single field? No. So why should they dictate for everyone else how to live their own lives? Just that premises alone. Would you go around bossing your neighbors because you have it written on a fancy piece of paper, because you have a certain uniform, because some of your other neighbors voted for it? So how are you going to impose your will on that neighbor that doesn't want you in that position? You're going to use violence? Because guess what? That's what every law, every collectivist notion is backed by, is that we can violate the rights of the individual for the group, for the collective, for society, for the greater good, for the common good. And as a result, because you're allowing chaos, chaos continues to grow. And we see this throughout history time and time again. So what is the solution? Well, it's actually voluntarism. You have to get to the root cause, and there's a belief system called statism, which is this doctrine of the state, as Carl Jung puts it. And we talked about this in previous videos too, but without understanding the root cause to every riot, for instance, well, there's oppression in every riot, right? And if we want to end the riot, we have to end the oppression. Now, where is the oppression coming from? If you want to get to the root cause, it's because people are fed up with the system. And the system is driving people insane. And this is all psychological, and it's all due to statism. And this has also been confirmed through the Stanley Milgram experiments. So you can really trace this back. And the more you go, the more you start to see, wow, there's a belief system that we're trained into at a very young age. And most psychologists today don't know about it yet. But I'm going to put some questions on the screen for you as an individual, because you can sort of see this mindset in yourself by asking 5 questions, and that's it. And then understanding, of course, what statism is, which is this belief system. It's the belief in human authority, that basically the belief, like I said before, that humans can be gods. And we're saying, no, humans are just humans. They're just like you and I. Why should we put them in a special position of authority? We think we need to. We think we need to have someone in this position. But where has it led humanity? Is it ever really going to work? Having a superstition, a belief system, which we know is not reality, we know is not honest, and we know is backed by violence. How could that make society better? Or rather, could we live in a voluntary free world, voluntarism, the root solution that says, hey, you, golden rule, want to treat others with respect, or you generally don't want violence. Most people understand that's wrong. So why should we make that the prime center as to what makes society works? Violence. No. Instead, love, compassion, care for humankind. But if a government was ran by care and love for humankind, then it wouldn't really be a government, would it? It would be people coming together on their own accord, voluntarily creating solutions for each other, just like they do for everything else outside of politics. You can look at it like a free market. And if you like the idea of, oh, well, if there's a demand, there's a supply, because entrepreneurs look for solutions. They look for, how can I improve the world? That's amazing. People trying to find solutions to things without violence. I mean, if we want a better world, a world with no war or chaos, then, well, we don't want order followers. We don't want people giving up their conscience, giving up what they know to be right to some select few people who claim to rule over them. there's your end to all war. There's your end to most oppression. It's the legitimacy of violence. It's the legitimacy of people being who they're not. And then you wonder why you live in a fake world, in a world of people you don't understand, doing all sorts of crazy behaviors. That is chaos. But yet, we should fear freedom, because freedom is chaos, and thus, because we fear it, we're never actually free. Thank you very much for watching. I want you to learn about this. Go to theliberator.us. That's theliberator.us. Send us your article. I'll turn it into a video for you. Thank you very much for watching.